free.
Welcome back to The Quiet Fire. I'm Jayne, and today's episode is one I have been deeply looking forward to, because after all the conversations we've had so far, the hormones, the rage, the grief, the body changes, the brain fog, the relationships, the emotional upheaval, we now arrive somewhere unexpected. Not at an ending, but at a doorway. Today's episode is called Reinvention, Purpose, Creativity, and the Unexpected Awakening. And I want to begin with this thought. What if menopause is not simply the closing chapter society told us it was? What if it is also an unveiling? Because something remarkable happens to many women during this stage of life. Once the chaos settles a little, once the body begins recalibrating, once the emotional dust clears enough to see through it, a question often rises quietly from somewhere deep inside. What do I want now? Not what is expected. Not what is required. Not what keeps everybody else comfortable. But what genuinely calls to the soul. And for many women, that question changes everything. Now scientifically, there are reasons why this period can become psychologically transformative. Researchers studying midlife development have noted that menopause often coincides with significant neurological and emotional restructuring. Hormonal changes affect not only the reproductive system but also the brain's emotional processing centers, stress responses, motivation pathways, and cognitive priorities. In simpler language, the brain itself is changing. And while that sounds intimidating, it also creates opportunity. Neuroscience tells us the brain retains neuroplasticity throughout life, the ability to form new neural pathways, adapt, learn, create, and reinvent. In other words, you are not too old. Your story is not finished. Your creativity did not expire alongside your menstrual cycle. In fact, for some women, creativity finally arrives fully once survival mode loosens its grip. And that part matters enormously, because many women spend decades surviving, raising children, building careers, holding relationships together, caring for parents, managing homes, people-pleasing, shape-shifting, performing competence even when exhausted. Then suddenly, in midlife, the body intervenes almost like a wise old priestess saying, "Enough now. What about you?" And honestly, that question can feel both thrilling and absolutely terrifying. Because once you begin asking yourself what you truly want, you may discover the answer no longer matches the life you built while trying to be everything for everyone. Now, I want to speak openly about purpose, because this word gets thrown around constantly these days as though everyone should wake at dawn instantly knowing they are destined to open a candle business in the woods while photographing mushrooms for Instagram. Sometimes purpose is quieter than that. Sometimes purpose is simply becoming more fully yourself. Sometimes it is returning to creativity abandoned decades ago. Writing, painting, singing, dancing, gardening, learning, studying, traveling, starting over, speaking up. And fascinatingly, there is evidence that creativity itself supports emotional well-being during menopause. Creative activities stimulate dopamine pathways in the brain, dopamine being associated with motivation, reward, and pleasure. Creativity also reduces stress hormones and supports emotional regulation, which means when women say, "I feel more like myself when I create," there is science in that too. And perhaps this is why so many women suddenly begin writing books, launching businesses, changing careers, studying new subjects, exploring spirituality, traveling solo, or finally using their voice during midlife. Not because they are having a crisis, but because they are awakening. There is a quote from author Honor Eastnin that I adore. "And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." That feels very menopausal to me, because menopause often removes the ability to tolerate unlived lives. Things begin itching at the soul. The unlived artist, the silenced voice, the buried dream, the woman who always wanted more than survival. And alongside that awakening comes grief sometimes too. Grief for years spent small. Grief for gifts ignored. Grief for how long women often spend disconnected from themselves while caring for everybody else. But here is the beautiful thing. There is still time. There is still life. And perhaps one of the greatest lies society ever told women was that aging diminishes them. Historically, Many cultures viewed older women very differently than modern Western culture often does. Postmenopausal women were frequently seen as wisdom keepers, healers, advisors, visionaries, women no longer governed by fertility cycles, but by insight and experience. Meanwhile, modern society often says, "Oh no, you're aging. Quick, inject something expensive into your forehead before anybody notices." Honestly, if wisdom produced collagen, women over 50 would run the world uncontested. But underneath the humor lies something important. Modern culture often struggles with female aging because aging women frequently become less controllable, less eager to please, less willing to tolerate nonsense, less frightened of disapproval. There is power in that, and sometimes that power emerges creatively. I cannot tell you how many women reach midlife and suddenly think, "I want to write. I want to sing. I want to learn. I want to speak. I want to create something that belongs to me." And I think that longing matters, because creativity is not frivolous. It is expression, integration, healing, identity, voice. Psychologists often speak about the importance of meaning-making during midlife. Human beings are not designed merely to function mechanically until death. We seek narrative, purpose, connection, contribution. And menopause often becomes the season where women stop asking, "What is expected of me?" and begin asking, "What feels true?" Now, does this awakening always arrive gracefully? Absolutely not. Sometimes it arrives while rage cleaning the kitchen at midnight after crying at a documentary about penguins. Sometimes it arrives through burnout, through heartbreak, through illness, through realizing your body physically cannot continue carrying the pace, pressure, and emotional weight it once did. And strange as it sounds, sometimes breakdown becomes invitation. An invitation to build differently. Now, I also want to acknowledge something important. Reinvention does not have to mean abandoning your entire life dramatically while wearing linen and moving to a mountain village in Portugal to make pottery. Though admittedly, occasionally tempting. Sometimes reinvention is subtle. Learning boundaries. Resting without guilt. Returning to education. Ending self-abandonment. Wearing clothes that actually feel like you. Saying no. Taking up space. Allowing joy. And joy matters, especially because so many women entering menopause have spent years functioning in chronic stress states. Long-term stress affects cortisol levels, nervous system regulation, sleep quality, inflammation, immune function, and emotional well-being. So, when women begin slowing down, creating, resting, reconnecting, and pursuing meaningful experiences, the body often responds positively. The nervous system softens. The mind clears. Energy slowly returns. Not because life becomes perfect, but because alignment matters biologically as well as emotionally. Author Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." And perhaps menopause becomes the season where many women finally stop carrying untold stories silently. They begin speaking, creating, expressing, living more honestly. And honestly, I think that terrifies certain systems enormously, because awakened women are difficult to manipulate. Now, before we finish today, I want to speak directly to the woman listening who feels uncertain about who she is becoming. The woman standing somewhere between exhaustion and possibility. The woman sensing something shifting inside her but unable to name it fully yet. Please hear this. You do not need to have your entire future figured out immediately. This is not a race toward reinvention. This is emergence. And emergence takes time. The caterpillar dissolves completely before transformation occurs. Inside the chrysalis, there is literally a biological disintegration before reorganization. And perhaps many women experience something emotionally similar during menopause. A dissolving, a questioning, a restructuring, an awakening. Not punishment. Transformation. Thank you for joining me today on The Quiet Fire. Next time, we are going to talk about something every woman deserves more of. Self-compassion, healing, and learning how to build a life that nourishes rather than depletes. Until then, create something. Speak honestly. Rest deeply. Laugh often. And remember, fire does not disappear when it changes form. Sometimes it becomes the light by which we finally see ourselves clearly.
free.